Let us pray. Oh God, we thank you for bringing us here to this moment. Make our eyes, our hearts, our souls afresh so we might hear what you would have to say to us this day. For we ask it in your Son's name. Amen. Let me begin by saying I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to tell you two things. One may make you panic, and that is I got up this morning and walked out without putting my watch on. And the second thing is I think I'm going to tell you something you probably have never heard another minister say, and you may never hear it again. I don't know, unless I preach this sermon a second time. There's a story that back in the mid-'70s, the Pope met with his cardinals to discuss a proposal from Israel. Your Holiness, said one of his cardinals, the Prime Minister wants to challenge you to a game of golf, just to show the friendship and ecumenical spirit shared between our two faiths. And the pontiff thought that that was a very good idea. But there was a problem. He didn't play golf. Well, the cardinal said, well, let's find someone that's capable of playing golf and representing you very well, and we'll make him a cardinal. And so they decided on Jack Nicklaus, who was a staunch Roman Catholic and a very good golfer. And they made him a cardinal and sent him off to play the round of golf. Well, about 2 weeks later, Cardinal Nicholas shows back up at the Vatican City to meet the Pope and to tell him of the game, the match, and what transpired. And he says, Father, I have good news and I have bad news. And the pontiff says, well, give me the good news first. And Cardinal Nicholas says, well, my drives were great, no better. I hit them long and straight, and I was on the green in the second shot, and my putts were true, and I read the breaks perfectly. And the pontiff says, well, my gracious, that's great news. What could be the bad news? And Cardinal Nicholas says, well, Rabbi Arnold Palmer shot one stroke better. Fairness. Fairness. We all want things to be fair. Most of us at one time or another have felt the sting of unfairness. Someone took advantage of us, maybe some weakness or physical issue, emotional or intellectual. Maybe we believe some situation that we thought we could win, only discover that things were kind of stacked against us and it was never intended for us to win. Maybe you were denied some status, some reward, some position at work. And you discovered later it wasn't because you were deficient in skill or knowledge, but it was because the person who got the job knew someone. And you felt how unfair that was. Most of us had dealings of unfairness as children. You know, some of us were the only child until 10 or 11, and the accident came along. And the eyes no longer were settled just on us, and we had to share things with a sibling. Maybe we were born last in the family, and our brothers and sisters dominated us physically, emotionally, intellectually, and we always found ourselves at the end, receiving the hand-me-downs until they didn't look like they could be handed down one more time. Sometimes unfairness comes in the form of criticism. You know, each little criticism builds and mounts in our soul from childhood to adulthood until you feel worthless. And you feel sometimes like a second-rate human being. You may even feel that there's no need to even try, because no matter how much you prepare yourself, no matter how much you study, no matter how hard you try, there's always going to be that critic to tell you you could have done it better. You could have done it faster. You know who they are. You know, they sit in the peanut gallery. And they don't have any skin, as a friend says, skin in the game, and they sit in the peanut gallery and watch you struggle and then criticize you when you don't succeed? How unfair. Most of us wanted to be treated fairly, to be loved and accepted for who we are, by why we are. If others must evaluate us, if others must judge us, we want them to judge us by the same standards that they judge themselves. Don't be hypercritical of me when you're not hypercritical of yourself, is our feeling. Governments began in ancient clans and tribes. There were conflicts, there were struggles, there were disagreements, and leaders made decisions, and those decisions were written down into laws and rules. And government formed to make sure that life was exacted fairly. We believe in fairness, even though sometimes we may fail to practice it. We have umpires and referees to provide fairness at our sporting events. You jump on sides, you get a 15-yard penalty. You grab somebody's face mask, there's a 15-yard penalty. If you beam somebody with a baseball, well, they get to take the base. There are rules and there's penalties. We want fairness. I remember playing in high school in the 9th grade, believe it or not. I was a free safety. I was a little skinnier, a little shorter back then than I am now. I was a free safety in the 9th grade. And we were playing Lower Richland, and Mooney Player was the coach. Some of you may remember Mooney. Great coach, very innovative, to say the least. He always had teeny tiny little linemen and huge backs. And those little linemen would get in your feet, and you couldn't catch the backs, you know. But that night, there was a couple of times they would break the huddle with 12 players. Well, I would rotate to the wide side of the field, and if I covered that end over there, guess what he did? He stepped out of bounds. My man now is on the other side of the field. Touchdown. And that happened twice. And finally, our coach called a timeout, and we started breaking the defense with 12 players. And every time their end stepped out of bounds, our 12th man would step out of bounds with them. You know. Well, at the end of that season, in the beginning or before the next season started, there was a rule passed. It was called the Mooney Player Rule. You could not break the huddle with more than 11 players, and if you stepped out of bounds, you had to step out of bounds on your side of the field. Now, why did they go to that trouble? To make it fair. To make it fair, to make sure the contest was decided on talent and preparation, on skill, not on dishonesty and trickery. Our sense of fairness has even entered the realm of warfare. After World War I, it was so catastrophic, so diabolical with the trenches and with the mustard gas and the new machine guns. The death rate was terrible. And so after the close of World War I, they had a Geneva Convention that would decide on the rules of warfare, the things you could and could not do in battle. Now, they tried, but nobody follows. But they did try. And why did they try? Because of a sense of fairness. Sometimes life itself feels just as unfair. You work hard to get your breaks, and then that lazy friend buys a lottery ticket and hits it for $200 million. Others get credit for your efforts and ideas. Good things happen to bad people. Bad things happen to good people. Droughts take place where there's already starvation. Hurricanes and earthquakes seem to hit the most impoverished areas of the world. Is it fair that people rake and scrape to save for retirement and then health fails and they can't travel? They rake and scrape for retirement and then someone steals their 401k. Nothing is fair in nature. The strong dominate the weak. The fast eat the slow. Learning that early on in life as a human being is a big part of our existence. Life never comes easy, but it's important for us to realize that life is unfair for our own maturation, both emotionally and spiritually. In the early morning on August 29, 2005, Hurricane Katrina struck the Gulf Coast of the United States. And the way it angled in, it came in as a Category 3, but the way it angled in at high tide, it devastated Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana. The water jumped the levees and drowned New Orleans, especially the most impoverished areas of that city. And the people fled. And we received some of those people in Colombia. And the church that I was pastoring, we leased a motel that was no longer being run. We leased that motel and housed people, 35 or 40, wasn't it? 35 or 40, I think, in that motel for 6-8 weeks. And that church, I was so proud of them. They did their laundry. They found bed clothes. They found clothing for them. And they worked hard to find jobs for them, and some jobs in out of state, and finding them other kinds of housing. But what we noticed about the Katrina victim was really humbling. They were already suffering poverty. And then when that hit, we noticed that it was a sense of trust that they lost. They no longer trust the government that responded so slowly to their needs. They didn't trust God anymore because they were already hurting, and then they had Katrina to do that to them. Could they trust life itself? But little by little, as that church ministered to those people, shed some light on their lives and gave them some hope along the way, and they saw the church struggling to make their life better, hope started growing again in them, and they started getting better. And they started recapturing a sense of fairness again. So in this text, Jesus knew from his own experience that one of the harshest lessons of life is to endure foul play. Throughout his ministry, he did nothing wrong. He preached the truth. He taught the truth. He fed hungry bellies. He healed wounded bodies, and he healed wounded souls. But there were those around him who had no skin in his game, the critic, the Pharisees, the scribes, the Sanhedrin, who criticized him. And ultimately, he was put to death unfairly, wasn't he? He was charged with things that he had not done. So in our text this morning, he tries to prepare these disciples for the foul play that they're going to face. He tries to prepare them for the same foul play that he received in his life. He says he's going to suffer greatly, be rejected, and put to death. And of course, Peter can't understand any of this. This old backwater fisherman is uneducated, and he's probably on the edge spiritually anyway, and he just can't understand all this. And he tries to defend Jesus. No, this is not going to happen to you, Jesus. He's saying in the back of his mind, he sees Jesus being a general, beating Rome militarily, driving Rome into the sea, and reestablishing the kingdom of David. That's what he sees in his head. He doesn't see Jesus dead. But Jesus does not expect his disciples to play fair. He doesn't want us to play fair. Let me repeat that. Jesus does not expect us or want us, those of us who follow him in the way, to play fair. Now that I got your attention, let me explain. In a world of fairness, there's balance. You do something to me, I do it to you. You step on my foot, I step on yours. You burn down my barn, I burn down your barn. Now, there was a rule in the Old Testament: if you burn down my barn, I can't burn down your house and kill your children. There's a limit. An eye for an eye. If you take one of my eyes, I can't take both of yours. I can only get one of them. And that led Mahatma Gandhi to say, an eye for an eye makes the whole world go blind. Fairness means you're going to give back what you get. It's only fair, isn't it? It's only fair to give what you've received. If you receive criticism, it's only fair that I be critical with you. If you hit me in the chin, it's only fair that I take a swing at you. Right? That's how we've been taught. That's how we've been nurtured. If someone blinds us, cuts us, mashes us, breaks us, then we're going to do it back. Hate for hate. Evil for evil. Pain for pain. Injustice for injustice. Reminds me of Mahatma Gandhi overthrowing the British Empire in India. He pleaded with his people for nonviolence. And in that great strike where he struck over salt, the people were lined up, the Indians were lined up, and the British had their sticks, and they were beating the Indians with these sticks. They beat them so long that they couldn't beat them anymore. And guess what happened? They had to put the sticks down. There wasn't enough evil in their swing to beat all of them. Now they wounded 400 and they killed 20. But they lost their moral and ethical edge. They could not support that violence for the passivity of the Indian. I remember Martin Luther King in all those cities across the Southeast. People rebelling against segregation. And he asked them to be nonviolent. And in the face of water hoses and batons and angry dogs, the black community circled itself in prayer and spirituals and held one another's hands until the embarrassment forced it to stop. I think about that Amish community up in Pennsylvania. West Nichols Mine and the shooting there when Charles Carl Roberts took over the school and killed 5 little children, 6 to 11 years old, and then committed suicide. Did the Amish run down to the home and to his house and assault the children and the wife and burn the house down for that evil that he did? Absolutely not. They went down there and ministered to his wife and to his children and forgave him in front of them. Took care of them medically, spiritually, and financially. Then they go back to the school where the murder took place. They tear it down and go and build a new school in a new site. And they name it New Hope. New Hope. I think about that church in Charleston, South Carolina. That community of faith assembled just to study the Word. And a young man came and sat in their midst, pretending to be a part of that community of faith. Sat there for a long time. And they were social and cordial with him. And then he would stand and execute them. Not because they had done anything to him. They had not caused him any harm whatsoever. The evil that he put upon them was simply because they were of another race. Did that community get a caravan together and drive to Columbia, South Carolina, where that young man was from, and burn it down? No. They forgave. They showed grace. And they showed mercy. The world is filled with evil. It's filled with foul play. And unless someone is willing to absorb that pain, to absorb that evil, to take in that evil, to hold back what would be fair, evil will win. But if we play unfair, like Jesus would have us play, and not participate in it, evil has no power. It can't control, and it will not win. I remember Jackie Robinson. I never got to see him play. I wish I had. I've seen film of him, but I was only 2 years old when he retired from baseball. But I heard so much about him. By then, it was not because he was the first African-American player to break the major league color barrier, but because of his talent as a player. I heard about his talent when I was in Little League. It was later that I learned about his character, the character of the man. And he was a well-rounded person. He had won national acclaim at UCLA, and when Branch Rickey decided he wanted Jackie Robinson to play on the Dodgers. And so he got Jackie, and he brought him into his office, and he said to him, "You must take every insult, every nasty name, every dirty play, every bad call, and do it without showing anger, temper, or resentment." In other words, no one is going to play fair with Jackie, and Jackie had to turn the other cheek and keep it turned all season long. And when Rickey told him this, Robinson rebelled. He said, you don't want a player that's not going to fight back. And Rickey shouted, "I want a ball player with guts enough not to fight back." And so it began. He broke the color line, all the while knowing that if he lost his temper, that barrier would be lost. He had the hard task to prove quickly that he was a good ball player, and to prove that even in the light of being treated badly, he was a good and decent human being, better than those who hurled the insults. When he was in Cincinnati, it was a rough season. People were sharpening their cleats, and they would cleat him as they ran the bases. They elbowed him, They did some really mean and nasty things to him. And during one game in Cincinnati, he was on first base, playing first base, and the dugout and those behind the dugout were pretty bad with their insults and things that they were saying. And Pee Wee Reese from Kentucky saw Jackie Robinson go stoop-shouldered. And Reese said up to that time he just completely admired Jackie Robinson. And he was the only one on the baseball team that voted to allow him on the team to begin with. And he admired how he was able to conduct himself and play such fine baseball while suffering all the indignities. And when he saw Jackie go stoop-shoulder, Pee Wee Reese ran over to first base and put his arm around him. And that whole white stadium went silent. Completely silent. Robinson's year of misery, his first in the major league, grew out of a prejudice and bias. No fair-minded person would have ever treated another human being the way he was treated. But he was a tremendous role model, and he showed us how to play unfair. You see, everybody in those stadiums, in those ballparks, wanted him to leash out, wanted him to fight back, wanted him to do something dark and ugly, so they could say, "See there?" And then even throw more insult and injury his way. Where did his strength come from to endure that? Where did Mahatma Gandhi's strength come? Where did Martin Luther King's strength come? Where did the Amish community's strength come? Where did the folk down in Charleston's strength come? Where did Jackie Robinson's strength come? From the one who refused to play fair 2,000 years ago. Instead of fighting back, he laid down on the cross. Nobody took his life from him. He gave it willingly. Christians do not fight fair. Repeat that. Christians do not fight fair. Christians instead surrender in the baptismal waters, under the shadow of the cross, in the midst of the flesh and blood we dine on once a month. All our need for retribution, all our needs to strike back, all our needs for revenge. I wonder, how about us? Are we willing to play unfair? Are we willing to lay down our need for revenge, to strike back, to harm those who've harmed us, to retaliate? Are we willing to love those who harm us? Well, unless we have a very strong relationship with the one who was the most unfair, the one who was most unfair who has ever lived, and guided by that Spirit, we will not be able to perform this supernatural act of returning good for evil. I pray that God will help us be those who shine light in the darkness, those who extend forgiveness instead of seeking revenge. And all God's children said,